wondering how I got into this mix. Mind playing tricks and I'm fiending for a fix.
This is Derrick Broze of the Conscious Resistance Network. Today is February 7th, 2015. Hope you're having a good weekend. Welcome to this week's edition of the Conscious Resistance News Wrap-Up, where we cover the latest information from our website, theconsciousresistance.com, and the latest of my articles covering a wide variety of news that you can also find at derrickbroze.contently.com if you want to look further. First off, I hope you guys are having a good week. Hope your weekend's off to a good start. I'm back in Houston, where it's a bit warmer. Spent the past week in New York City on the East Coast, where it's way too cold and frozen and icy for me, but I was there to cover Ross Ulbricht's trial, the Silk Road trial, and I was happy to do that and to help get the word out for Ross. We're going to get into that in just a few moments and the unfortunate guilty verdicts that came from that. But first, let's look at what happened this week in the news on theconsciousresistance.com. So we had a new interview from Peaceful Anarchism with Bill Buppert, I don't know how to say that last name, founder of ZeroGov.com, who is an abolitionist extraordinaire. Check that out. Also, we have last week's news from me, where I discussed agorism, torture, license plate readers, and Operation Killing Bay from Anonymous related to the slaying of dolphins in Taiji, Japan. We also had a new article called Student Loan Debt, the Modern Rite of Passage, which is important, of course, for those of you who are just getting out of college or still paying off college loans from 10 years ago. And we had a new episode of Abolishing Authority from Michael Freeman, and another piece from our new contributor, Mark Todd, with The War on Drugs Has Failed, and a couple recent ones from Katie Chaos, Deflategate, and Is American Sniper Anti-War. And I believe we have a couple more pieces that are in the back end I need to approve and bring out to the front of the site. And we've also added this page here you can see, or if you're watching or if you're listening, you can go to the website and look at the top bar and you see a page called The Book, and that is about the Conscious Resistance Reflections on Anarchy and Spirituality that is being written by me and John Vibe, And right now it's just got a little bit of information. As soon as we get the artwork finished, we're going to post that on there, and this will be the hub where you can get all the related information about the book, and eventually in the next month or two you'll be able to buy the book from this page. I know I've been saying we're trying to wrap it up, but I keep getting busy having to go out of town and cover this Ross Ulbricht trial and other cases, but I don't see myself going anywhere now until Philadelphia in April for the Free Your Mind conference, which is where we will be officially releasing this book. So look for us to finish this book in the next couple days to a week. And also, if you want to be a supporter of my work directly, you can subscribe through Patreon, patreon.com/Derrick Broze. And that is where you can support me directly if you enjoy all my free articles and all the videos and content I put out there that's publicly available, but you want to support me a little bit further. You can give as little as $1 a month. $1 a month. And that'll give you access to other podcasts beyond just this one, where I go into more in depth with spiritual topics, philosophical, and lately I've been covering the Barrett Brown and Ross Ulbricht trials and giving more in depth coverage than I do on this podcast. And last week I read the first chapter of the book exclusively for Patreon subscribers, and this week I'll be reading chapter 2 of the book. So if you're interested in hearing more about that and seeing content that is exclusive to my supporters and helping me out a little bit so I can hustle even harder and bring you truth and awareness, then please consider doing that. Now, before we dive into the news, please be sure to go to youtube.com/consciousresistance and subscribe to our channel there. If you're listening to the SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/TCR live, subscribe to that as well. And you can follow us on Twitter at TheConsciousRN. My personal Twitter is DBrozeLiveFree. And of course, you can find the Conscious Resistance Network and myself on Facebook. So check it out. Now let's dive into the news. Let's see what we got here. Vaccines have been a hot topic for quite some time now, but especially in the past week or two, as this measles outbreak in California, Disneyland, has caused a wide range of responses from the media and from politicians, from everything from saying that parents who don't vaccinate their children should be put in jail. There's a couple of legislative matters being considered in, I think, 6 or 7 different states. I saw a good article from the Associated Press yesterday wrapping up all those. And they range from basically ending exemptions like this one here in California to Democrats introduced this idea which would remove the parents' right to exempt their children from school vaccines based on personal beliefs. Democratic state senators Ben Allen and Richard Pan announced the legislation, which they say is designed to, quote, keep our schools safe and our students healthy. And if this happens, California would be the 33rd state to refuse parents the right to opt out of vaccinations. Interesting there. Now, one story I wrote for Ben Swan just yesterday, and this is the angle I've been trying to play up to people. If you see me sharing these articles, or if you see these articles, please do share them. I think that, if I can say so, that I wrote a fairly balanced article. This one's new, but I wrote one before this that was related to a report that came out from the Associated Press where they analyzed the so-called vaccine court and found a number of problems with it, namely that people whose families are harmed by vaccines end up going years, sometimes over a decade, before they are compensated, and some people even died waiting for compensation. And there's also, of course, that the doctors and people that come out to defend the vaccines often have connections to the pharmaceutical industry. And then again, on the other side, it also said that lawyers tend to see this vaccine court as a win for them because the vaccine court pays out to the lawyers whether or not they win. So lawyers, even if they don't believe vaccines are causing harm, if they meet a family and a family truly believes that vaccines have harmed their children, they can just take advantage of them, take it to the vaccine court, file a bunch of legal briefings, and whether or not they win or not, they will still be paid. So that's another problem with this. But this article I wrote is related to the CDC whistleblower that we've been keeping our eyes on since last summer, I think around August was it when he was first revealed. CDC whistleblower and scientist Dr. William Thompson. The article is titled, Has the CDC whistleblower been given immunity to speak about vaccines? And let me read a little bit of this for you. A whistleblower scientist with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has reportedly been granted immunity and may possibly speak before Congress regarding a connection between autism and vaccines, the ever-contentious topic of autism and vaccines. Yeah, I know, it's probably going to stress some of you out to think about this. The Daily Caller has reported that Dr. William Thompson has been granted immunity by the Obama administration following the revelation that he was involved in fudging numbers in a study related to vaccinations and autism. Dr. Thompson would later release a statement through his lawyers stating that he had handed related documents to Congressman William Posey's office. Now, this is the new piece of news. According to the Daily Caller, the Obama administration has granted whistleblower immunity to a federal government scientist that claimed he intentionally omitted information in a study that would have shown race-based link between vaccines and childhood diseases, including autism. Now, it says here that somebody with Congressman Posey's office told the Daily Caller, a whistleblower came to our office. He came forward with documents saying that CDC had manipulated one of the studies and that he was an author on that study. The study has a relation to vaccines and autism. They said they're reviewing his documents, and they said that they're working with the science committee to actually get a hearing. We're talking about its integrity within its agency, and it's rightfully under the purview of the science committee. The Daily Caller goes on to say that the Congressman Posey supports the use of vaccinations for children. However, quote, parents should have all the information they need. Posey serves on the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. And BenSwan.com spoke with the members of the Canary Party, who are a party that pays attention to vaccinations and vaccination rights. And they said that they are, quote, suspicious. There are suspicions about the source of this report. As of the publishing of my article yesterday, the Daily Caller remains the only source of the alleged immunity. So it's interesting here because basically what this would mean is that the scientist here would be granted immunity, which means that he wouldn't be able to be charged for his lying, and he's already being protected. If he does end up speaking in front of Congress, it might end up being very convoluted and, not lead to much truth. But as I said, he first made headlines last summer when he spoke about a 2004 article published in the Journal of Pediatrics that he was involved with, that he said they purposefully omitted data that demonstrated a connection between the increased risk of autism in African American males who were given the MMR vaccine before 36 months of age. He also said he believes vaccines save lives, but that the CDC has been hiding controversial data. And then I do a little bit more explaining of that vaccine court, and then there's a report from Ben Swan on the vaccine court as well. Keep your eyes on that. And as I mentioned, California and other states are trying to end personal exemptions for families, and we'll have to see how that plays out. And then you also have this article here that somebody sent to me that is from November of last year. And it says that Merck has some explaining to do over its MMR vaccine claims. And these are the same vaccines that we were just discussing. The MMR vaccine that William Thompson's study that he was connected to shows apparently a higher rate of possible autism connection for African American males than it does others. And even the Huffington Post references William Thompson here, said that there's 3 different whistleblower cases going on, all involving Merck, the company Merck, and their MMR vaccines. Now, if you wonder why things like this aren't necessarily talked about in the mainstream, the old stream, the dying dinosaur media, as some like to call it, if you go to CNN's website and you go look at their list of sponsors, you might find Merck there. You will find Merck there. And so that might be one of the reasons they're unwilling to talk about these topics. And now, am I saying that all vaccines are bad? No, I'm not saying that. I think this is a choice that each of you, if you're a parent, need to make for yourself, because I'm not a parent. I don't trust vaccines personally. I know that vaccines have helped us, get to the point where we are and helped us get people healthy. But I think the state that we're dealing with now is that children are over-vaccinated and are basically given a cocktail of all kinds of things, and they're being used as experiments. Just this morning I saw another story about families in India where their children died after being given an experimental vaccine as part of a trial. See, they're going over to these poor nations and testing them out on these kids, and whenever they die in the process of it, they don't report that to the Western, modern American public who continues to trust these issues. And now we have a situation where the state is almost considering actually forcing people to vaccinate their children or go to prison. This is a dangerous situation. So hopefully we can get some common sense in here. I do think there's a problem with always relying on science and this materialist worldview as if science is not a dogma and not a business that cannot be corrupted and hasn't been corrupted. That's just silly, especially if you understand the state. The state will do anything to maintain its power, including probably vaccinate its own people for forced sterilization, or some people say this is a soft kill population control method. I don't know. I just know that people seem to get messed up, sick from vaccines, and I've never been vaccinated, at least since I've been on my own, and that's going on, 15 plus years, I know, since I've been to the doctor at least, and I stay pretty healthy. I think that a lot of this has to do with your diet, exercise, and a lot of just the way you live your life is what's going to lead to illness. Of course, there are diseases out there that we need to be protected against in some situations, but this does require a bit of discernment on your part as a free individual to decide what is best for you and your family. So let's move on to the next story. This next story, of course, covers the Ross Ulbricht Silk Road trial. This is one I just wrote for benswan.com. Let me get this sized up so you can see it. The Silk Road founder, Ross Ulbricht, found guilty on all charges and is now facing life in prison. And I can say this was very difficult to be in this courtroom. Throughout the several weeks that I was there and came back and forth to the courtroom, it was obvious that the judge was going to block any of Ross's defense team's witnesses. They were striking certain pieces of evidence from the record. They were doing everything they could nearly to keep his team from being able to mount a positive, strong defense, And this is problematic for very, very obvious reasons. Here's a quote from Ross Ulbricht in his journal that they read aloud, or that they showed on the screen during his trial. The U.S. government, my biggest enemy, was aware of me and calling for my destruction. This is the biggest force-wielding organization on the planet. Wednesday evening, the saga of Ross Ulbricht and the Silk Road trial reached another milestone as the jury reached a verdict of guilty on 7 charges related to distributing narcotics, fraudulent documents, money laundering, and continuing a criminal enterprise. Ulbricht has been on trial since early January for his role in creating the Silk Road online marketplace. After deliberating for around 3 hours, the jury came back with a verdict of guilty on all charges. After the verdict was read, the Ulbricht family was in tears, and supporters in the audience yelled, "Ross is a hero," before wishing him farewell as he was escorted out of the courtroom. That was actually me who yelled "Ross is a hero." I just didn't want to write in first person there. But I was quoted in several different publications. One of them actually used my name, and I think the Huffington Post called me a dreadlocked supporter. They always want to mention my hair. But the verdict was read, as I said. It's just they came back in less than 3 hours, 3 hours and 20 minutes, I think what it was exactly. And they came back and they're just like, guilty, guilty, guilty. And you just see Ross's mom and dad just sink in their chairs, and his sister started crying immediately. And after being at Chelsea Manning's verdict of 35 years and feeling that kick in the chest, and then going and watching Barrett get railroaded and getting 5 years in prison, it becomes a lot to take, and it sort of becomes instinctual where you just can't help. Like as they were picking up Ross and taking him out, it just came out of my mouth. Ross, you're a hero. Ross is a hero. I didn't even really think about it. It just felt like he needed to hear that, and his family was like, "This is not over. We love you, Ross. We're gonna keep going." So his sentencing will be on May 15th in New York City, and I have some really in-depth notes. I might make a podcast over that for those who are interested, because I really think for those who are interested in these technologies and in trying to be aware of the way the government operates and the tools that they use against free people, then this is required reading. These transcripts of this court, you'll start to understand better how exactly they controlled Ross, how exactly they infiltrated the Silk Road marketplace, and what tools they use. I will say that there was a couple of tools that Ross used that they were unable to crack, or at least they didn't mention the evidence in there. Maybe the government didn't want to reveal all its cards and put it all in public, because over and over, the government kept objecting every time Ross's team would get somewhere towards what they would consider sensitive information. And this sensitive information might help free people like you and I who are trying to be more aware of how to avoid the government. But he used a tool called Pigeon, and there was another one called Adium. I got to look it up, but there was definitely some tools for communication encryption that the government seemed unable to crack. Because they presented every piece of evidence that they could. And overall, I would say that Ross's conviction is a combination of a couple of different things. Obviously, the government infiltrating the Silk Road. They arrested certain people, they took over their accounts and used their names and then infiltrated that way. So, they were able to build evidence on that front. But then there's also, Ross seemed to feel very alone, because he's running a operation that is taking people outside of the control of the government, and he recognized that. But for whatever reason, and the reason he said was because he had hoped that a book or a movie would be made about his life eventually, and he wanted a detailed account of that. So he kept several years worth of journal entries detailing his operations, and the government was able to find those things and use his own words against him, and it was a horrible travesty to watch that happen. And also, I would say that and some would say that maybe there was a bit of ego involved in this with, some of Ross's own words just getting boastful about taking on the government. And I think that we have to be, the things I've been telling people that I'm taking away from this case is that the government considers it to be a crime for users of the internet to want to be anonymous. Just, only criminals would want to be anonymous. Why else would anybody want to hide, right? I mean, that's ridiculous. The second is that, well, I don't think selling, using, or buying drugs are a crime. It's victimless crime. This whole thing is just, it's insane to sit there and watch this jury come back, and they're looking at this man like he's a criminal mastermind. And if we find out later in the second trial that Ross faces that these murder for hire charges were true, obviously I wouldn't support that. I don't support aggression or violence on other people, but so far the government hasn't proven that beyond a shadow of a doubt, and there was definitely some holes in their theory on being able to prove that that was Ross. Namely, that on the internet you don't know who's who. There was several different agents involved, all kinds of different accounts. They didn't know which one was an agent, who was who. I mean, it was very confusing for even the government, the people running this operation. So I don't think these drug crimes alone are even crimes. There's no victims. Ross was simply collecting a commission off of his website, off of the deals that were made there, that he created to allow individuals to freely interact and to grow and do business without the control of the state and the government. And that is what this is really about. That is why the government is coming down so hard on him and wishing to challenge his creation. And the third point I want to make is that if you are doing something that is quote-unquote illegal in the eyes of the government, please be smarter than telling your significant other, you can't do that. You have to be, unfortunately, guys, you have to be kind of in the dark on your own here. You have to keep it to yourself, because not only do you put people that you care about and love at risk, but you put yourself at risk. Because Ross told one of his girlfriends told one of her friends, and one of her friends went and posted on his Facebook at one point, and the government was able to go back and capture this image and statement. Oh, I'm sure the police would love to know about your criminal enterprise. I mean, that's just stupid. So the person you think you may be with for the rest of your life right now may end up being your worst enemy in a week or two. Or people act emotionally and illogical sometimes, and they may think, you know what, I'm going to go harm this guy and go tell on him, without realizing that they're putting you in a position that could put you away for the rest of your life. I also did another interview on RT with Abby Martin. You can check that out on the same article. All these articles are going to be in the links either below the video or below the SoundCloud. And I'm going to read this into the article for you. Internet freedom activists fear the verdict will chill the internet and possibly free speech. They argue that allowing Ulbricht's charges to be considered under the doctrine of transferred intent will lead to criminalizing behavior of users of websites. Hypothetically, a user of a website could now make illegal statements or threats, or perhaps use a site like Craigslist to organize buying and selling of illegal products, and the owner of the website would be held responsible. The Silk Road trial and the punishment that Ross Ulbricht received are examples of how the modern drug war is being waged. In the age of new emerging technologies such as Bitcoin, the Tor browser, and the deep web, governments around the world are working nonstop to shut down these tools and to paint everyone who dare use them as a criminal. If technology is to play a role in freeing the hearts and minds of the people, and thus freeing us from tyranny, we cannot allow brilliant minds and powerful new technologies to be suppressed under the guise of keeping people safe from victimless crimes. Bam. That's all I got to say about that. One thing I do want to comment, though, on another topic before we move on. I've had some critics coming at me now recently because I decided to appear on RT, first as Ben Swan's guest for his news program, and then as Abby Martin's guest on Breaking the Set. People telling me, oh, I'm working for Putin, I'm working for the Russian government. First of all, I'm not even working for RT. I'm a freelancer. I own my own work. But if I take an interview with somebody to help expand the knowledge of those viewers and to help grow that message, that doesn't mean that they own me in any way. Please be more intelligent than that, rather than just assuming because I'm a guest on a program that I'm now beholden to the Russian government and I won't question the Russians or something like that. You know, I believe in conspiracies. I know that they're fact, and I know that there are shills out there. There are definitely agents within any movement. It would be silly not to think so. But come on, guys. If you know anything about me, I started from the bottom. Now I'm up at the top. You know what I mean? Alright. Seriously, though. I'm just a regular dude trying to spread news, and I own myself. I own my work. I'll never be owned by anybody. You better believe that. Moving on. A couple more stories here from the Liberty Beat. LibertyBeat.com. Peruvian Indigenous communities stand strong against oil companies, and this is always a beautiful thing to see. I like to highlight the indigenous resistance to the modern age, and this is something that we're going to play into our book, The Conscious Resistance, Reflections on Erican Spirituality. As I can read, this book right here has been helping me a lot. I don't know if you can see this, and you probably can't see it if you're listening, but it's called Spirit and Resistance, and it's by George E. Tinker, Spirit and Resistance, Political Theology, and American Indian Liberation. And what he discusses, before we get into the story, is how over time the nation state has become the only respected, accepted institution around the world. You know, so that means tribes and smaller communities, indigenous communities, are just seen as ethnic groups within the larger landmass. You know, for example, the United States, right? Whenever we talk about the Native Americans, we use that term, Native Americans, and it gives people this image that, oh, there's just a bunch of Indians that are all the same spread out throughout this land. When in fact, before the English came this way and took over this place, there was hundreds of different ethnicities and groups and tribes and languages and cultures that were here. Not just one monoculture that is Native Americans or Indians or whatever, however they want to think about it. And that is part of the racism and part of the destruction and the colonializing of their culture and of their people. And the other aspect is just that they cannot get recognition, that they're not seen as sovereign, free individuals. They're just seen as pieces within the whole of the larger landmass. And this really has helped me see how states operate. States are really just gangs that at one point or another came along and were able to take control, and whether through bloody or non-violent means. But over time, it's been hundreds of years now, guys. We are now living in the modern day where the people who took over and have passed down their power to their families and kept this state in control, and even the people behind controlling the states and who are really influencing things, they see themselves as the rightful rulers, and they seek to suppress anybody who would dare challenge that narrative, especially indigenous communities, because indigenous communities, I believe, are the strongest example of the lack of authenticity and relevance and, the rightness of the state to be able to claim this power over people, because we are free individuals, and indigenous communities show that. These are communities that have been around, that many of us can trace our heritage to, but they've been around for millennia and living in their own lives, and now they're being forced to assimilate or die, and many of these communities are ready to die. Indigenous communities in the Peruvian Amazon continue to fight against oil contamination caused by state projects. Men, women, and children with the Quechua have blocked oil company boats from passing through the River Tiger for almost a month. The local communities say the companies are polluting the river and will no longer allow the companies to operate. Quechua leader Jose Fachin has said the communities are ready to die defending the river. The communities are asking for remediation, compensation, and to be consulted on future projects. Is that freaking difficult to give them, a notice if you're going to come try to destroy their land? And maybe how about beyond just notifying them? How about respecting them as free individuals, that we don't have the authority to come into their communities and try to do projects. Instead, we see them as equals that we do business with. That might work. And the last two things I want to talk to you about this week are two studies that I wrote about. The first one is for you parents out there. You got some decisions to make. Do you want to vaccinate your kids? And do you want to give your kids cell phones, iPads, and all these type of devices? Which, let's be honest, there's a growing amount of parents that are giving their children these devices before they're even 3 years old. A study published in the Journal of American Academy of Pediatrics suggests that heavy use of mobile devices such as smartphones or iPads may affect a child's ability to learn self-control. Researchers with the Boston University School of Medicine warn that the impact of mobile devices on young brains is not currently known. The scientists are concerned with the devices becoming the predominant method for pacifying children and the effect it will have on their ability to develop self-regulation. Lead researcher Jenny Radesky suggested parents increase, quote, direct human-to-human interaction. Imagine that, human-to-human interaction. That means you got to spend time with those damn kids you created. I know it's rough. Why would you want to do that? They're crazy. They're driving me nuts. I need my free time. This is why I don't want kids. Because I value my free time and I want to do what I want with my life. Maybe at some point what I want to do with my life might be bringing a new child into this world. But, I'm just kind of going off on a tangent here because I see parents, and I know being a parent has to be stressful. And, there are some times where you're just like, but ultimately you love it and appreciate it. But as much as you want that time to just go relax and putting the kids in front of the TV or the movie or whatever, or giving them the iPad, the device to play with, seems like a solution. Obviously, we have a situation where there's lots of adults who are disconnected from themselves, and this seems like this might be more disconnection here, where people are going to grow up with lacking self-control apparently, and just growing up used to using the internet as the way to, when they're bored, they need to pacify themselves. Go use the internet, use a device, don't communicate, less human-to-human interaction. Is that what we want? No, we need more. Cultivate human-to-human interaction. And the last study that I will bring to your attention this week contradicts several other studies from the past that have claimed marijuana, cannabis, as I like to refer to it, the real name, or pot, or ganja, Mary Jane, what other names are there? Buddha, the green herb, I don't know, I'm just kind of going off here, sorry guys. New study shows that smoking pot does not shrink the brain. Published in the Journal of Neuroscience, this study has found that daily cannabis use is not connected to brain shrinkage when the effects of alcohol consumption are considered. Neuroscientists at the University of Colorado at Boulder reviewed scientific papers that concluded cannabis use caused parts of the brain to shrink and found the studies were not consistent. By matching daily cannabis users with non-users based on alcohol consumption, the researchers were able to account for the influence of alcohol on brain shrinkage. They found no measurable difference in the size of the brain between those who consumed cannabis daily and those who did not. So, surprise, surprise, it could be that the alcohol consumption is the more dangerous effect and actually what could lead to any possible brain shrinkage in those of us who consume cannabis. It makes sense to me. I do know that, yes, smoking cannabis is not the safest way. There's still the combustion, the fire, and there's possible carcinogens released through there. So we're moving towards the age of vaporizing and vaping and dabs and all these type of crazy new ways to get high and to enjoy yourself. But your brain's not shrinking. In some cases, it may allow you to be more creative in your thinking, but also for others, it makes them paranoid. So it is a personal thing. It's up to you to decide what works for your body, your mind, your heart, and your spirit. Thank you guys for watching, for listening this week to the Conscious Resistance News Wrap-Up. As I said, if you'd like to hear some clips from the book, please become a subscriber on Patreon, patreon.com/Derrick Broze. And pay attention to theconsciousresistance.com. We're going to be loading some new articles and videos throughout the week, as we always do. I truly appreciate everyone who subscribes to our page, who follows us on Facebook, who shares the YouTube videos, those who support my work personally. You know, this is a journey we're on. I really believe that the Conscious Resistance book is going to help awaken minds and really establish this new position of being educated and aware about the news, understanding that states conspire and work together, and understanding that ultimately the strongest thing that we can do as free individuals is to work within our own hearts, our own minds, and our own bodies, localize within ourselves, and to heal ourselves, and to spread that message of compassion, awareness, and healed living to those around us. And I promise you, we will see that change reverberate and resonate throughout our communities until, you know, we have created a time and a place of free people that don't need the state, that don't need the government to rule them. And that's what we're after, right? That's what I'm after. I hope you'll join me on this journey. Thank you guys for listening. I'll be back next week with more news for you to check out. Subscribe to the YouTube, subscribe to the SoundCloud. And as always, if you can hear this, you are the resistance. Peace.